Amara Samata is a leading transformational guide, a communication strategist and mediator, renowned for her innovative frameworks designed to foster authentic connection and well-being. As the founder of the Enoughness Institute, she developed the Enoughness method for rapid personal clarity and self-mastery. Amara is also the creator of the Above the Line Relating, a powerful relational intelligence training, Inner Mirror, a 3-level framework for trust building and conflict resolution, and Golden Request, a 6-step process for healthy negotiation. Her signature philosophy, Relationship Squared, emphasizes double mutual respect, cultivating healthy interdependence, shared growth, and authentic connection across all facets of life. Amara's work provides profound tools for navigating complex human dynamics, making her a vital voice in understanding intimacy in its broadest sense. Amara and I have been chatting before we hit record. I'm already fascinated to learn more. So I'm going to just dive straight in. First of all, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for joining us from the beautiful island of Bali today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Your work focuses on very profound personal and relationship transformation. And one of the things on your website that I really loved is your timeline of your life, which I haven't really seen before. From your, in your words, your troubled teens, time as an actress, spiritual awakening, breakdown, and your rebirth. And so I have to really start with you and your life. Can you tell me a little bit about who you were and who you are today?
Very nice. I think who I was somebody who was very curious about, just what makes people tick and how life works and what's kind of the big picture, what's going on underneath it all. I've always been, of that mindset, trying to know like what's going on beyond the surface of things. And I had a real slant to understand. My father was a Southern Baptist preacher, and my mom was a nurse, a homemaker who was very much into practical, logical things that made sense. And they had very different ways of looking at the world. And so I think it sort of just made me really wonder about what goes on with people. And obviously, there were times where there were challenges in my family, and there was a lot of not getting along, a lot of fighting and things between my parents. And I really wondered, like, how can we stop that? how can we have environments where that doesn't happen? Like, what's the alternative to that? So I think that was, always in the back of, how to break through, how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. I went into the performing arts first, really as just a way to overcome my shyness. That's how it got started. And then I got accepted to NYU on scholarship for acting in ETW and theater. And then I went on to Hollywood. But it just seemed like the natural thing to do. But I've also been somebody who's very principled, and I like to make challenges for myself. I learned that people can change when they make decisions. And I saw that in my own family, big changes. On one hand, people would say, people don't change. And on the other hand, I saw, yes, they do. When they decide to, they can. So I made a decision to step out of, the business, as they call it, and to go into the healing arts. So that was something I was interested in. I got very much into yoga and meditation. And I think that really set me up for something that I didn't know was coming, but I was always searching for. And that's when I ended up going, when I moved to Asia, in fact, from the US, that's where things got really, really deep. And I was blessed to be in front of some very profound teachers, Buddhist teachers. And I did 2 years of private mentorship with a lama, a female lama that I sponsored for 2 years in the Dzogchen tradition, which is the fast track of self-realization. And I just got to a point where I just decided I was going to go all in wherever it took me. I was open to it. So I took myself into the deep end, which is part of the work that I call, into the deep. And that produced some very profound experiences that led me to the work I do today.
Have you always had that? I can't think of a better word. That sort of brave element to your character, because I guess if your father is a Southern Baptist, so quite a religious person, then you decide to, right, I'm moving to Hollywood, and then, right, I'm moving to Asia. They feel they're quite big decisions, and you said decisions change you. So have you always had that, right,
Yes,
self belief that you can do things and you just do it?
yeah, and I have to say, I did have a near death experience as a child, and that's what shifted things for me. So when I was between the age of 5 and 6, I fell into, I didn't fall into, I was being very curious about the deep end when I wasn't supposed to be. But I was very curious. All children are curious until
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
kind of knocked out of us, right? But I went to the end of the deep end of the pool, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. And it was as if my child mind went away, and there was this kind of mature sense of being. And there were three things that happened at the bottom of that pool that really changed my life forever. And you don't have to go to the bottom of a pool and almost die to have these. I'll just share them with you now, and you can take them in now if they resonate with you. But one was that I wondered, wait a minute, what was this life about? And it seemed very odd that I was ending a life when I hadn't cultivated its meaning yet. So I understood in that moment that life has meaning, and the meaning of life is to make up the meaning of life for yourself, to derive meaning, to find it for yourself. It's not a specific meaning per se, unless you decide that that's what you want your life. You want to believe differently, and you want to believe that, but you have to make your life meaningful. And every life is meaningful and can be more so the more you connect to it. The second thing was I knew, all I can say is I just knew that this isn't what we agreed to. And so I knew there were agreements that had been made. And I realized that if agreements have been made, then agreements can be changed. We don't have to stick to the agreements. If we know about agreements, things can change, but some agreement have been made. And then I was going to talk to them on the other side. And I knew there was another side, and something had gone amiss. And this wasn't not at all what was agreed to. So I knew there was another side. And from that moment, I've always lived life. I came out of that pool a different person, or remembering the bigger picture. You could say that this life is embedded within sort of another frame, is what it, this is the truest truth that it could feel like. So I was always very like, what's going on that other side? And what am I doing on this side? And I knew that I was here to put the pieces of the puzzle together. That's the way I framed it for myself. And I needed to do that for myself, which I did in all of my seeking. It culminated in a experience of finding. And there's a lot of seeking. We're taught how to be seekers in our spiritual work, but we're not often taught how to find, or even sometimes it's even sort of like people roll their eyes or something at the idea of like, sure, finding the truth or finding realization, but it's actually available, it's possible. So I can't say I found the truth because it doesn't really work like that. I can talk about that in a second, but there was finding. That's called awakening or self-realization or something like that. That seemed to have happened. And so I kind of finished my mission early. And so everything else has been just, the next level of contribution and giving back. Yeah. So what questions does that bring up for you?
Gosh. Well, first of all, thankfully, obviously somebody got you out of the deep end. And it's a
Yes,
mix.
I did. I quit struggling, and then I floated. I prepared to die, and then I floated up to the top of the pool. And then the next thing I knew, I was in the shallow, and I stood up. So everything happened within 30 to 45 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because yes, it's that sort of near death experience, but it almost feels like a new life experience.
Yeah.
You sort of saw you saw something that many people never get to see in their whole lives, and you experienced it at 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Which is, it's really interesting when you say about there's almost that implicit criticism when somebody says that they've found themselves or they've reached self-realization. It's sort of, I must get that idea that it's like, no. It's all about the journey. It's all about trying to find something. I mean, nobody's talking about actually finding it. This is just about trying to find something. And when you say, well, I found it, it's like, what? And
I'd be like, right. Yeah, it's always both sides when you're talking in terms of orientation, right? Is it the journey or is it the destination? Well, it's there. It's always being and always becoming. So it's always both.
And was there a moment when you recognized in yourself that you had found it, or you had reached a level of self-awareness or self-realization that was very different than what you'd experienced before?
That's a very good question. What was the moment?
Well,
Like?
was there a moment, or is it something that it sort of evolves, or how did it feel?
Okay, we're going deep in. So first of all, I did not have an awakening because the identified sense of self doesn't have an awakening. That self-identity as a separate single source or perspective, point of view, that you could, it's always going to sound like an orientation when you are in separation, but we could say it dissolved or it fell away to a significant degree. And then what was left was what we call awakeness, or just unfiltered seeing. It's not, so much filtered by not only a single perspective, but a conditioned single perspective. So those layers fell off. That's a very big day when that happens. And there are many things that happened. I was instructed for 2 years before that day happened and how to prepare for that day, if and when that day came. So there's a lot of preliminaries that goes behind, in front of it, depending on your capacity and what you're ready for. But it was, it left me in we'll say me. It left me, which I like to call manifested energy instead of manifested ego, which is kind of how I was operating before, in a state of nearly unbearable bliss for 24 hours a day for 7 months. And it took that long to integrate what was happening. There was a lot of, I call it the data stream. So there was data just like kind of, like coming into the system, or a kind of, remembrance or of how and what things are and how they work. A lot of what people would call mystical things, but to me, they're just very logical. It's just the meta-logical. So by tapping into that, I suddenly found myself able to have conversations with the people that I coach through transformational guidance now, CEOs, billionaires, geniuses, people at very high levels, and able to hold space for them. Because it seemed like something was able to see what I kind of always suspected was there from that 5-year-old, but it's like it kind of filled in the dots. And so there was a whole complete reorientation to everything, because orientation had been greatly shifted. So I'm writing a whole book about not only this experience, but, what it does and what it brings. And as my teacher said, I don't want to say too much about it, because then people can start in the spiritual world can start adopting those behaviors to try and mimic awakening as a way to kind of like when I worked with my Lama, I would tell her what was happening, and then she would say, here's the opportunity and here's what to watch out for. But she would never tell me. I had to come to her first with my experience, and then she'd unpack the next level and the next level. But what came from it was I began to see people had came to me for these kind of intuitive healings, is what they called them. More like emotional. There were some physical things that happened to people for sure, of course, as a kind of domino effect. But yeah, I just saw how to unpack people and how to put them back together and ask them the right questions and guide them into things, and energetically. And people just kept coming to see me one after another. And for 3 years, that's all I did. And I didn't really look up. I didn't really know what year it was or what was happening. I was just, how can I help other people kind of get to this realization if they want? And so I learned a lot about the patterns that illuminate people and, to support them, and the ones that kind of we use to protect and sabotage ourselves. And then I started to create frameworks because I saw that it was needed to do that. So a lot of things happened in that, and I can answer any further questions you have about that if you like.
I have a million questions, and I know
It's a lot. It's a lot.
We've only got one
like
life to talk.
It's a 7-day retreat to talk about that for sure.
Yeah, it just one thing that it sort of that I felt when you were saying that is that you are a. I don't know if this is a good thing to say or not. Really, you seem to be a very, and just to rationalize it in my own head, you seem to be a very, very bright, glowing star individual, have an energy and an aura that's very, very bright. And I often think for people that have reached the level that you have of self-realization, do the rest of us, and I'll answer this as you feel free, but do the rest of us seem very sort of dulled and very dim in our lives? That's sort of how it feels. That the rest of us, I think, are quite sort of, rest of us, or I am quite sort of in my own self, and I think whereas for you, it's very, even looking at you, you have very bright energy to you. So when you walk around, does it feel like everybody else has got this very dim, very unexplored aura? Does that make sense?
Yes, of course, it makes sense. The answer is no. I call it. There's a different name for it in Buddhism, and it has to do with very deep things around how you see things afterwards. But let's just call it, for the mainstream, let's just call it I call it perfection perception. You see the perfection in everything, and the beauty in everything, even, in the wonderful things and the horrible things. In my teacher used to call it the realization that everyone is like a golden Buddha with a burlap sack over them. And so I only see the perfection in each person that I'm speaking to. Some it's very much hidden. Some it has a little spark, some it's going in and out. But I tend to focus on that. And I understand that everyone, just as I did, or what a sense of I seems to have a sense of free will for some time in some way. And we have a right to have our experiences, for better or for worse. And we also have a right to tap back into this truth that's always there waiting for us to be, awakened by, I like to say, by inspiration or desperation. Those are kind of the two levers that tend to pull it forward, some of both. So, my ego was taking a very big hit, and I was very desperate because I was going through a divorce, and that was something that was very much against my values and something I didn't want. But I also realized that staying in this relationship, I was going to make sacrifices that I wouldn't be able to make and still be true to myself and kind to myself as well. So I was in a lose-lose situation, and I felt terribly fail. Just massive fail. And so that kind of desperation said, well, remember to go, let's just go fully beyond, into the great beyond, however beyond we can get, into the truth, and whatever that is, just, hit me with it. I'm ready, whatever it does. But you come out seeing, if people could see how incredibly beautiful It's the only word I can use. This very small word for it, but beautiful the world is, and they are. Um, I would love to invite them into that space for sure. And we're getting there more and more. I mean, these topics were never talked about 30 years ago, 20, 15 years ago, whatever. It was just, we couldn't even have this conversation in a normal mainstream space.
Such a that's such a wonderful way to be, and it feels like this this way of thinking, this approach, this recognition. And I really like when you said before that the decisions we make can change us, and we can make decisions, so therefore we can change. Which is, it sounds so simple, but it's very very profound. But I think it feels like almost the way the world is at the moment, for many reasons. It's almost like the world is sort of open and in need of this way of thinking.
Yes.
And it's because I really struggle with the notion that a lot of people think about humans and nature. So humans and nature, as if there's a very clear distinction between the two. And I'm very much of the view that, but we're all nature. Everything is nature, whether it be a rock or a river or a tree or a human or a dog or a cat or whatever. We're all part of the same entity. And some people, no, humans have dominion over nature. And we've seen where that's got us. So I hope that over time the world, and it's a big place, is starting to recognize that a lot of things that we've been educated in or taught in Western society perhaps isn't the only way of thinking. There is a different philosophy and approach where nature, as this overarching entity, is what it's all about, really. And it feels that's sort of where you've got to way ahead of everybody else. So it feels like the world is starting to be ready now, and hopefully more and more people do recognize that.
And humans have a very unique nature that we can fool ourselves, and we can also unfool ourselves as well. And so that presents an interesting challenge for us in our evolution. How to unfool ourselves and to step out of contradiction and protection patterns, and all these kinds of things, so that we can be, as you say, in our what's called our nature, our true nature, our self-realized nature, which is kind of like a realignment with what actually is. I like to say people are looking for a shortcut. They're always looking for a shortcut to the here and now. So it's right here. Your nature's right here. But wait a minute, how do I get there? So we kind of have to do some circling around and some processing and going through things in order to kind of get back to where we actually already are.
And I think maybe we're the only species that sort of thinks of, almost sees our mind and our body as separate elements. So I think of whether it be a tree or an ant, they very much live. And I without knowing how they think, I don't think they sort of separate what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling. It's just they just are one entity. And that's not really a question. Just a random statement. Sorry, I should get back to the questions. So one of the things I do want to talk about some of the methods that you develop, because they are really powerful and they are really, what's the right word? They're very clear in what they try and achieve. There's not any, and again, that's the wrong word. There's no sort of wishy-washiness about them. And I wanted to sort of touch on the inner guidance method. So a lot of us don't have personal clarity. I know that inner guidance method helps develop a deeper connection with our own inner self and the impact we make. And I wondered, how that impacts our ability to be authentic and intimate and engaging.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. So The inner guidance method, as I started to work with people, I have a process of getting them to be honest with themselves.
Mhm.
And then when you look at a framework of honesty, when you're honest with yourself, um, you'll tend to uncover that there are different sides to yourself. Maybe you've heard of parts work, like that. So only recently, it literally in the last week or two, have I started to look at IFS, for example, inner family system.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it works with the different parts of yourself, and it's very fascinating how there's a lot of overlap in the work, and yet it's also quite different how it's handled and how it's done. I would say the inner guidance method it's very direct, and it steps you into the elephant in the room, so to speak, and it steps you into looking at yourself. But what you'll see is that you often have a split, two sides of you. One part of you is secure, feeling very secure, and other part's feeling insecure.
Yeah.
And so these two sides have two sides, a healthy and unhealthy version of themselves. So I work with those four quadrants, and you'll start to realize that you can't make a decision and take decisive action until you understand the push pull between those, and you want to renegotiate with them so that you have a healthy polarity, like a gas and the brakes in the car, right? You don't want a car with only gas or only brakes. You need both. And you want to have a healthy version of using those. So, a lot of the times we're going around with the gas and then the emergency brake on, right? At the same time. It's like part of me does and part of me doesn't. And so we have this feeling torn or conflicted. So that's what I work a lot with. And so we look at both sides. You will literally, from your awareness, you'll talk to both sides. And when we go into the deeper layers, they will talk to you. And then you will realize, only by looking at both sides will you realize, oh, this one had a piece of the puzzle and that one had a piece. And when I put them together, here's what I now realize. And this was what I call below the line relating, or unhealthy relating, or non-resourceful. And above the line, here's where it gets really healthy and harmonious and resourceful. And the byproducts are all those things we look for: happy and healthy and wealthy and wise and peaceful and joyful. Here's where that happens. And once you have that discernment, I call that discernment mapping. Once you see that, you can't really fool yourself in the same way anymore. And that's where you're able to make changes very rapidly. And I guess I see that there's a lot of kind of, on the, again, I know I came very much from the so-called woo-woo world, or the world of, I'm in the hotbed of that, living in that part of the world. And spiritual bypassing is a real thing, where people go to one area of, and it may have wisdom in it for sure, but they avoid another side. I really like bringing together, the East and the West, and the mystical. And I think mystical is actually very logical. I don't find anything mystical about things. When you can see the bigger picture, it suddenly makes sense. But for an individual, they're walking through the prompting, they're answering. So I work with the assumption that you already know the truth. It's my job to guide you into it. So I don't give you any truth. I can support you with some things to think about. You have your own truth. That's the nature of nature. It knows itself. It's giving yourself permission to take that back when you've been incentivized to maybe step away from yourself in some way to please another or to fit in, all the things that we were taught when we were young. So once you start doing that and you start making different decisions and you talk to yourself in this way, your life really starts to change, and my clients are able to do really big things. And then the next thing that happens is they start interacting with people, and they need to negotiate with them, not just themselves. So that's why I created methods around healthy communication, so that they could actually move into the next level, which is bringing them into kind of collaboration. So you start to create an upward spiral in your life, with your relationship to yourself, your relationship to others, and then kind of the existential relationship as well, for those that are interested in it. Yes. It's practical.
It is. I like the idea of an upward spiral, because all we often hear is downward spiral.
Mm.
And as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, that does make relationships. I'm thinking particularly with our partners.
Yes.
It does bring a level of understanding as to why they can be quite complicated. Because if I've got this, and obviously I have this two or more elements to me that I think, well, but I think this, but I feel this, but I know I feel this, but I think this, and my partner has the same. It's, oh my goodness, how on earth do we become one? Not that we should become one, but how do we become a better fit with
Yes.
ourselves as opposed to doing this, which I think is because if neither of us have sort of reached the point of understanding or reconciling ourselves, then how do you
Yes.
reconcile a relationship? And is that something you work on as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Okay.
do a lot of mediating. And I just wanted to not skip over the question you asked about being authentic.
Hmm.
So again, there's healthy authenticity and
Mhm.
unhealthy. There's a kind of where I'm being authentic to my protective, sabotaging self. And that has a certain kind of feel to it, where we used to justify a lot of things, but I'm being authentic. And that's kind of in that conceptualized version of you should just love me as I am.
Hmm.
And although there's some truth in that, there's also an and it feels good to rise into your goodness, your greatness, your creative nature, becoming, as we say, better versions of ourselves. And we can be authentic to that as well. But coming into relationships, yeah, how do you bring not some idea of perfection into the relationship, but somebody who has the ability to, has the tools for self listening, meaning consideration of part of me wants to, part of me doesn't, part of me gets this, until it kind of falls into place and you just get it, you just know, you just are, right? You kind of hit that center point. And then how to invite another person into having, into that kind of a relationship with you. So I call this relationship squared.
Mhm.
Um, we might call it love squared. That's also something that I talk about, and it means. So here's the formula for great relating. Great relating. Um, I take care of myself, and I take care of you. You take care of yourself, and you take care of me. And if nobody drops the ball, like we're good, right? We have all four of those. So I need to trust and support you taking care of yourself. And I also need to lean into you and receive and let you give and have some support there, and vice versa, right? So usually in an unhealthy relationship dynamic, somebody's not taking care of themselves or they're not taking care of the other. And then there's all kinds of reasons why that is. And often a person who secretly wants to be cared for is really blocking the care, right? And so there's ways that we untangle that conditioning and that way of being to allow new things in. And again, I'm interested in how to do that as quickly as possible,
Yeah.
bypass as much suffering as possible. Yeah, and I love doing that, and I have done, yeah, with couples that come to me and work through that. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's interesting when you said that about your intent on helping people bypass as much suffering as possible, because it sometimes feels that we're almost programmed to believe that suffering is part of it. That we
Mm-hmm.
almost got to suffer to get. And you think about the people going to the gym; they always say, "No pain, no gain," and it feels a little bit like that in relationships in a way that we've sort of
Got
we've
it.
got to suffer to be happy. But your way sounds much nicer, much much more sensible. But
Yeah.
is that something you've come across? There's almost I feel no, we've got to sort of suffer through this, and then we come out the other end, sort of thing.
Okay. So again, there's healthy pain and unhealthy
Okay.
pain. Suffering is more of a mindset, right? We don't say my arm is suffering right now.
No.
It's more of a mental thing. It's in
Mhm.
pain. So there is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable things that we need to do in order to get into a healthy relatability where we build, especially if there's trust has been broken.
Yeah.
And there's building back layers. And so there's a process of grieving that you go through and understanding to kind of reset yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And to make no mistake, it's uncomfortable and it's egoically, personally, existentially, very uncomfortable. I call it even humiliating. Like if you're going to go into the deep of transformation, prepare yourself for humiliation where you're just like, oh, I had it so wrong. I convinced myself I had it so right. There's a kind of righteousness that falls away. But the beautiful thing is underneath that, there's a wisdom that returns to you. It rises up as well. And there's also an innocence that comes in. So you get this wise, innocent, playful joy. Like you just get a returning to all these beautiful natural qualities. It's hard until it's not, but it should not cause suffering. It's the good. If you're going to the gym and it feels painful in a good way, like I'm building myself into something that's going to be of service to the life force that I am, I would call that a healthy pain.
Yeah.
If you go to the gym because you're punishing yourself or someone else and you want to feel the pain in order to confirm this hurtful belief, I would call that unhealthy pain.
But have you found that you're a very different partner and lover than you were? I guess thinking back to the time before your divorce when things were very difficult and very traumatic and you hadn't been through this life-changing experience or life-evolving experience. So are you a very different person in a relationship now than you were before?
Yes, very different. And this is what your audience likes to know about, right? In the interviews section and everything. And just to wrap that up, I will say a lot of the work I do is around cultivating discernment, which is what's needed for awakening. So that in the spiritual realm, that's where where we're headed. But yes, so my relationship completely changed during awakening, and I saw many things and felt many things, but very, very clearly I saw how I was operating from a misunderstanding in the past that led me to be quite, I don't know what those labely words are, but like codependent, kind of victim thinking. I realized I used to say that, my husband was, verbally abusive and an angry, hard on me person. And then after the awakening, I said he was the perfect reflection of my insecurity at the time. And he was the perfect unhealthy coupled match for me to act out many things that I was believing within myself. And that was taken away. Well, first of all, the idea of being sexual was just very, very strange. And I realized that the way we sexualize ourselves is, again, built on so many concepts where we're almost bartering and trading and in order to kind of like build back some value in ourselves that we lost, that we gave away. And I just saw this whole kind of construct sort of fall away. So for months, I think about 6 months after the awakening, during that phase, and I was in so much bliss, that's the way I can describe it, that being with a human made no sense at all. It was, there was so much happening with me that it was deeply full within its own nature. There was somebody who came to me, and he was a very spiritual man. He was very devoted, and he was quite idealized in the spiritual world, and his concepts and everything. But at least he understood that something very what he would call powerful and magical or something had happened to me. So he was very protective of me, and he was very sweet, and he was very, bowing and respectful and kind, and held space for me. And yes, but when I connected back, and it's interesting you brought up the nature, is when I connected back to, I guess what you would call sexual intimacy after that, it was all about nature. I was just connecting with forests and stars and the cosmos. It was very, cosmic in a lot of ways, and portals and energies and, all those things I was tapping in. And I kind of had to either bring myself, and try to figure out how to balance between this huge opening in this way and stay connected, not abandon my partner and just kind of be in this space. Or sometimes I would, and we would talk about that, and, or connect back with him, and what does it invite in him? And, so there's a lot of things that can go on in that space that can open a person and their partner up, creating upward spirals together. As opposed to something that, is kind of, just say that there's a lot we can talk about what can happen in that space and what can evolve from it. But what I realized is what we truly are and what we tap into, what it showed me, what I was always sort of craving in the act of intimacy was that, but I didn't know how to get to it. And so I was sort of, it's kind of like when I was younger in my 20s or something, I would take occasionally, not very often at all, but I would take some kind of a substance or something, a drug or something, recreational drug. And at the end, I would always cry. It's not real. It's not real. And I wanted, the real. And I realized that in my intimacy, I was missing it in me, and I was missing it in that. And it always sort of left me feeling close, but not really. I didn't know what it was. And then, once sort of returning to myself, a completely different relationship to partnership after that, and connection.
And do you think we are designed or predicated to be monogamous or polyamorous, or what do you think our natural state is?
So I think the less complicated answer is I don't know, but I think every person can kind of, again, they can find it within themselves. There's a lot of arguments of why poly would be helpful, why monogamy would be helpful in certain contexts and world. And we can convince ourselves of things that are important and makes it okay for us to make sacrifices. So it's a very complicated thing. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. But again, there's healthy monogamy and unhealthy. There's healthy poly, I'm sure. I know of two couples on the planet, and I've spoken to quite a few of them, that I would call healthy. The rest I would check all in the unhealthy basket, including some of the people who teach it that have come to me for work. And I do see that certain ideals, monogamous or non, tend to attract kind of a lot of the unhealthy mindset. So I think more important than the byproduct of your loving relationship is more sort of, what's going on underneath with you. And I always say, start with one person. Let's see if you can get healthy going with one person before you start spreading it around. And that's quite a feat. So again, the ones that I know have done it well, they have cultivated a very conscious, healthy mindset with one person. They very slowly, or very intentionally brought in another. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to do this now.
Yeah.
And off I go with my same mindset, bringing the same problems. And then in poly, it's easy to bypass it and just say, the moment things get difficult, I just go to the next partner and the next partner, the next partner. And in monogamy, it's easy to just hide behind the roles, or, I'll just play the wife, or you just play the husband, or whatever. I'll just do my job as a parent or whatever. And they kind of hide within that as well, not really connecting either. So I would say go for a healthy relationship and then see where that takes you, and know the tools to get there. And then let's find out what's possible. Yeah.
You said about job as a parent, and I think a lot of relationships, we do fall into particular roles in terms of whether that's the jobs that we do, the actual the money and the jobs we do, the jobs we do in the house, the jobs we do at home, the jobs we do with our children, and all those things. And I think whilst physical intimacy is often a part of people's relationships, it might be less frequent than one partner wants, more frequent than the other partner wants. I do think we haven't necessarily been guided or given as much thought as we should do to emotional intimacy, if that makes sense. So we have the physical intimacy, the physical act of lovemaking or sex, however you want to think of it. But then that emotional intimacy is something very different, I think. But I think it's almost more important. And so if just give you a scenario. So, and this is one that's close to home. So we were talking before we started about having sort of children that are growing up, and oh my goodness, they're suddenly going to do that thing that you've always wanted them to do, is to leave home.
Yes,
and you suddenly have that empty nest. And whilst you might have been physically intimate throughout the marriage, etc., you sort of look at each other and think, gosh, that emotional connection that we had 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, how do we rekindle? How do we bring the emotion back into the intimacy? If a couple comes to you, and so I'm asking for free therapy now. What? How do you help people? Because you said before that we've all got the answers within us, which I truly believe as well. I don't think anybody can give you the answer, because then it's not your answer. So we have the answer with it. How do you help people peel back what might be many layers to get to that emotional intimacy connection again?
Yeah. So if you look at emotions and feelings, and as I use these words, emotion, and some people do it opposite, but emotion is the single word. We can put it in one word. It's the emotive feeling. It's the sad, mad, excited, happy, joyful, hurt. It's just that raw kind of emotive label. And then wrapped around it, we have a story that drives it.
Yeah.
Right. So when you share your stories that are important to you, and that's where we have our emotions around things that are important. So when I'm working with clients and I say, if they often I'll see people start to cry and then they try to cover up their crying. So in my work, I say, crying is just one indication that you've tapped upon something really important. And that's all it actually means. And then the body's doing whatever it does when you start to tap into something that's really important and you start to realign. It creates clearing or whatever. So when you can come together and talk about your dreams, your fears and the story around them, your hopes and the stories around them, your excitement and the story around it, and you can swap stories, and then once you do that, you get into negotiating. What are we going to do about your story, my story, this dream? Where does it get to, what space does it get to hold? What support are we going to give to it? So you start negotiating down the way. But how do you connect? Make space for sharing. Here's what's happening for me. Here's what I've been thinking about. Here's what I love. And I have a little trick for this. If you want, I can give you a little exercise to do. It's fun, but you have to be very brave. Like all my work, you must be courageous. Okay. My teacher told me to teach only the courageous ones. Those are people that are willing to override to some degree a sense of fear, right? So you sit with your, and you have to do this when you're not terribly triggered with each other, and there's, you want to be connected, but you can be having some friction or whatever, but you block away some time and you play the best friend game. So you sit down and you pretend that you're long lost friends. You haven't seen each other forever, and you have this 1 hour to catch up with each other, and you just are going to share about your life. And so you say, like to your wife, you would say, "Gosh, it was so great to see you." And she'd be, "Yeah, it's amazing to see you." And she'd be like, "Tell me, how are you? How have you been? What's going on in your life? What's going on? How's your wife? What's your marriage like? And what's really going on?" And you know how you open up to that old friend? You're like, "Well, gosh, this is working, this is not." And then your wife can start to give you tips on essentially on her, right? So if you said, "Well, I'm having issues where like maybe we've drifted away from each other lately," she could say, "Well, have you ever tried doing this?" She might like that. And you're like, "Oh, that's a really good idea. Okay, I'll have to try that. What about you? How's your relationship been?" And then she'll tell you about you and let you in on the secret of how she's feeling, about you. And you can say, "Oh, wow, that's difficult. Okay. Mm, would you like to hear what I think about that?" And then, you give each other tips, and it's like this confession that you're doing with each other to understand each other from a completely different point of view rather than directly saying things. And even just a little of this will start to create this sense of kind of edgy, exciting, scary connection and intimacy and understanding. And then, anytime anyone can say, "Yeah, I think I have to go, but thank you for sharing all that with me. That was great." And it's a fun practice for people who want to go a little bit deeper into confessing. And there is a way to open up, and so I teach people how to connect with each other and talk in a very self-ownership, responsible way that invites the other person to do the same. And that's where things get really, really empowered, whether it's with your partner in work. I use it with my son. I used it with him as a child and a teenager all the time. And we have a great way of connecting and talking. When you have those skills, they're really with you for life, those skills.
And I really like that. I'll try that.
Okay, the long lost friend.
I'll let you know how it goes. Because I do think it sounds completely counterintuitive that sometimes the person or people it's hardest to communicate with are the people we know the best or have been with for the longest, whether that's our brother, sister, parents, wife, husband, child, or whatever. You think, well, we've been together you've known me since I was born, for goodness sake. Surely we can just talk and we can communicate. But I think, and when I'm sort of thinking as I'm saying this now, I think the reason for that is that there's almost the most risk in getting that wrong. So if I'm talking to somebody that I don't know, I can talk to them very openly. Funny, I was on the bus yesterday and I started talking to somebody very openly about lots of different things. My goodness. And I'm never going to see that person again. And it was fine. It was nice to talk to them. And she was fine, and she listened, and I listened to what she had to say, and it was a nice conversation. But then I thought, right, I'll come home and I'll have a conversation. Oh my goodness. Did I say this wrong? Or if they hear what I'm saying in a wrong way. So thinking about it now, it almost makes sense. It's almost the biggest. You've got the most to gain and the most to lose. So it's, gosh, do I risk the gain for the sake of maybe the loss, or do I just leave things as they are? But neither of them are very happy. But yeah.
And this is the conversation. This is what I help people unpack. Okay. And if you are a couple in crisis or a relationship in crisis, at some point you can't not take that risk.
Yes.
You must take that risk. Otherwise, you or the other person will suffer terribly. And of course, learning to preempt that stuff going under the carpet and kind of building up into a mountain of resentment, or the elephant in the room, as we say, we want to learn to build back trust and not let it get that far, in the future. But many things have gone unaddressed, little by little by little.
Yeah.
And I think if people understood what it took to have a healthy relationship, I mean, you can't let little things slide. You can't. On the other hand, once you've earned trust, you've built trust, you can let lots of things slide because you trust each other. So when people talk about these qualities that they want to have, I call those mountaintop relationships. And a mountaintop relationship is earned. You don't just walk up to Mount Everest in one day, like it's no big deal. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Mount Everest. It is that for a reason. There's having to talk through things, little things, having the patience for that, to see what does that reveal in me, what is that bringing out in you. Here's what we learned about it. I think you really have to have a love in relationship for relating. And I suppose some people kind of are in it for other reasons, not really for the relating, but for more of the lifestyle, with the relating kind of as little as possible on the side. I don't know. And if that is satisfactory to them, that'd be fine. But if it's not, then relating is essential to understand how to do empowered relating with yourself and with the other person, how to role model that, how to build that, how to help each other when one's kind of fallen off track, and kind of remind each other. And having those skills is going to build into that great relationship, being a great communicator, great connector. Having those, you do have to work at it. Again, like at the gym, right? You have to work at it. But it should be I call it the good should. It's like, I should do that. I should. And it feels good to say that. It's not the dishonest should. I should, but, I'm going to not address this whole other side that is there as well. And we're often torn. And so we have to look at different sides. But I think having the skills is really key. And we are not taught those skills, fortunately.
It's funny because if you're in a corporate role, then typically you have a weekly catch up with your manager, see how things are going. You have a sort of quarterly touch base, half yearly review, and an end of year sort of audit to get your objectives and everything else. And I don't want a sort of set of 8 objectives I should have hit in my marriage, but we don't have that sort of. Yes, we talk all the time, but we don't have that sort of weekly. That's how are you feeling? How was your week? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? And
kind of
anything you want to do differently next? How can I help you? All those things we don't have it, do we? Whereas in a corporate role, we have it all the time. But in the more important role, our relationships, we don't have it. And do you think you mentioned the word love a few times, which is something I don't hear the word often enough. But do you think it's important that we learn to, or we expose our ability to love ourselves if we're going to have a successful relationship?
So there's a fundamental principle of understanding and embodying enoughness. And enoughness is the understanding that you are enough. And what that leads to is being resourceful enough. So if you are resourceful enough within yourself, you can resource your own. What do I need to remember today? What do I need to focus on today? What do I need to drive my actions towards today? That's a kind of inner resourcefulness. And then that leads to outer resources. Well, here's an opportunity I can leverage off of, right? Here's something that I can connect with. And so that starts to build this kind of sense of a foundation to work with. And if you bring that into love, if you understand I'm resourceful enough to take the relationship I have or the relationship I want to attract and to bring it in and to live with it in a way in which my goal is to be really in touch with that truth that keeps us connected and thriving and learning and evolving, as opposed to being afraid of the truth. Because a lot of relationships come in and they do what I call the under the table deal. You know, I'm afraid of this, and I don't want to face this in myself. And you say, well, perfect, because I like to avoid these things and I definitely don't want that, or I can play perfectly. Okay, you know, deal. And then they shake, and then, you know, they wonder why they ended up exactly where that deal kind of took them. If we were making a different deal, which is I'm going to try to be as resourceful for myself and for you, and you try to be as resourceful as you can for yourself and me, and then add something like, how are we doing? Like, yeah, let's check in. Let's have some consistency. And if that gets boring, let's have some anomalies. And if that gets too unstable, let's bring back in some consistency, you know. And if you allowed yourself to play within those parameters and you understood that, I mean, yeah, you'd have a very different relationship to your relationship. So I think you have to really, one person has to really want to rebuild.
Yes.
And then they go through the process of finding out, does their partner want to rebuild? Because there's either the partner, the other one becomes either inspired by what you're doing and is so thankful and rises with you, or they become very threatened by what, hey, you're breaking the under the table deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We weren't going to get healthy about this. Like we were going to stay confirming what felt safe, even though it wasn't very healthy. And that does happen sometimes. And then the partner cannot continue on and chooses either directly or indirectly to, you know, knowingly or unknowingly, they're like, I don't want, what is this healthy voodoo that you are doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But most of the time I find actually people are so thankful. Like, somebody stepped up and became the one that stepped into that space, and all the beautiful things that comes with it. Showing up, growing up, waking up all together, and in relationship, showing up in a new way and inviting in new things. And that's that, especially when you're at the stage of, you know, the children are growing up, you're going empty nest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been sort of just letting the children become the defining thing about who you are, and you haven't really developed as a couple, but you haven't prioritized that so much. You've prioritized who you are as parents, and then they leave. A lot of couples don't know what to do now. How do we reconnect as a couple? And that can be a very beautiful, uplifting experience, or it can be a very daunting one.
Yeah. That notion of enough is one that I think our society has sort of challenged quite a lot over the last few years. I think we've developed into this very sort of comparison culture particularly with social media, and we see these people with these perfect lives in Bali that are living the dream, and oh my goodness, what a wonderful, and we don't ever see them, you know, having to do the washing up or the dishes or cook the food or go shopping or whatever. So we sort of look around and we see what other people have, or we see what people allow us to see, I guess. And we think, gosh, I haven't got that. Therefore, I need to have that to be happy. And we have this, almost this mountain that the top's just covered in cloud and we're never quite sure how high it is. But we just have to keep going and keep getting more and more and more, because enough isn't a word we can accept. So I love the idea of helping ourselves uncover that we are enough, and not that we have enough, because whatever we have doesn't matter, but that we are enough. And is that hard for people to get to that point where they?
Yeah. The first thing that they have to distinguish between is this idea of being enough and being good enough.
Okay.
So being enough means at my foundational level, with whatever experience I'm in, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, some thoughts and a heartbeat. Here I go. What can I resource? It's like going back to the source, as we say. What can we resource within ourselves, within others? What can we invite? What can we ask for? What can we give? What can we receive? And what is that going to start to generate? Now, will that mean that you're guaranteed to be good enough? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe you're not good enough. Who's decide? I don't know who's putting the criteria on it. Is your life good enough? Is it great enough? Well, that's up to you. And understanding, here's what I'm willing to sacrifice in the healthy way, above the line. I won't sacrifice in an unhealthy way that's going to drag me down and burn me out, right? And so therefore, it's like my son says, you got to choose your choice. You chose it, like choose it. Don't be complaining about the thing that you chose. If you want to choose something else, you choose that. But really learn what is possible with, what will become possible. Will you become good at something a relationship or connecting or communicating or lovemaking or starting a company or whatever? You might be. You might even be great. You might even become phenomenal. And in where and with whom. So a lot of people feel like I'm not good enough. And the truth is, maybe you're not. I don't know. But you're enough. You are enough. I'm not good enough to play professional basketball. I always say this. There is no way that I am being put onto the big leagues. It's never going to happen. But if I wanted to play basketball, I could get good somewhere, right? And play with someone and have a good time. If I think pro ball and I have zero skills in that area, if the gap is so wide, I'm going to have to work on why that is and what that is and go through my grieving and my understanding process to get myself into a better headspace. And then I will use my resources to play basketball. Now, I have no desire to play basketball, but people need to understand, you might be great and telling yourself you're not. You might be not great in telling yourself you are. You need to look at, be able to get, this is where we go into, you need to be able to open yourself enough to feedback. And you need to understand what feedback is, because it's other people's projection. And so there's certain projections that we trust and other ones we don't. And so we need to trust the projections that are coming at us and take them to help us sort through some things, to reach our own answers inside, and not use them kind of as a way to skew the data in ourselves or coming to us from others. And we can become good enough, for sure, even great enough. And I believe there's a greatness. I think that's our secret longing as a species, is to become great.
Yeah.
And we are actually tired of not hitting that mark. And I think we're driven to become great. And all of our failures are leading us to trial and error, bringing us to a greater potential. And the question is, do we run out of runway before we get there or not? But I like to say nothing gets wasted. So even if we do run out of our runway as a species, that energy will go somewhere. And we can just hope that it gets, sort of recycled into whatever else the creation is making. And so yeah, keep going.
You've been so generous with your time. Just two more questions, if that's okay.
Yes,
so
sure.
one is, do you have a view of the future? What the future holds for you? What your aspirations are, professionally, personally? Do you set targets, or do you manifest things? How do you approach the next, 5 years?
Yeah, I am very much now in looking at how to scale what I do, and how to collaborate, and to do to collaborate with people in order to bring this work to as many willing and ready, willing, and able people as possible. So I am I'm looking to bring the frameworks together with other experts and to create very meaningful things for people. And the work is, it's very transformative, and it's very threatening to our old sense of
Yes.
being. So it is. My beginning work is often called very advanced by people, so or very like it's kind of deep level. But I believe that people can get there, just like in this conversation. We can get there. I have a way of getting people there, it's a little bit faster than possible with certain ways of incentivizing and motivating that's aligned with their truth. And of course, they're in the driver's seat the whole time. But yes, I'm working on writing a book. I'm going to start doing social media. Everything has been done very much in the incubator and in this like bubble that I live in, as a kind of in the know secret weapon for people. And I want to step out of that now. So I'm kind of at my 10 years creating an overnight success. I'm kind of
Yes.
at that point right now and looking to grow. So if anybody out there is hearing this or watching this and they think, I'd like to know more about how those unlocking of truth and relating and connecting and communicating can work for my life or my people, definitely reach out to me. I'm already in the process of working on that. But it just takes people who align and who are ready. And so this is kind of my beginning of opening up to the greater whatever world out there.
Well, thank you for doing that. So I really think, I can't imagine anybody that's listening that isn't thinking, as I am, I would like to know more about that. So what's the, and I won't hold you to this date, but what's the sort of target for the book, and what do you know what the book will address?
Yeah, right now it seems to be, and this of course could change when you're book writing, but it seems to be about, which I'm working with my clients, your relationship to yourself, your relationship to others, and your relationship to the bigger picture. So we'll have some of the examples from my life, and without making it too much about me. But I've realized that I actually have to let some of me in it in order for it to kind of to open up to it. So how to relate to yourself, others, and life itself in a way that is what I call. So a lot of what we're doing in that fooling ourselves, I call it winning a losing game. So that's really what the book is about, is how to stop trying to win this losing game where you're really taking yourself down, thinking that you're not. And we as a people, as a species, are really in the we right now of like pulling ourselves in directions that are not healthy. And how do you win a winning game? And a winning game is a game in which you cannot lose no matter what you do, because you're in it for the right reasons. You're doing everything from a good foundation. And you don't fall into the traps, and you optimize the opportunities. So this is what I call the trap opportunities of life. And is it a trap? Trap opportunity. Is it a trap or is it an opportunity? And that takes discernment. And that's why we must build awareness into greater discernment with ourselves and with others. And I have frameworks to fast track that experience through dialogue processes that I do. So I'm looking to bring those at scale. Let's go.
Nice. I can't wait to read the book. Get on with it. Come on.
January. I'm shooting for January for it to be out.
Awesome. My last question is, so when you work with clients, you obviously maybe hear some traumatic things, some difficult situations, and you're there to help guide them. How do you continue to nourish your own mental and physical well-being? What's your daily practice? How do you look after yourself?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So first of all, I tell my clients this too, and my students who I train not to ever experience burnout. I have been going on 12 years more in this, 13 years, no burnout. And that's because it starts with again, I don't see any victims. I don't see, there's some byproduct of things that can look like, there's ways of behaving that can look like a victim. But I know every being is a sovereign being who's just forgotten for a bit, no matter what level of trauma they're going through. And there's some deeper principles in there that allow me to look at somebody never with pity, always with just compassion and awe of the experience of working with another living being. It's always quite the honor. I'm kind of always in a certain, we'll call it a state of being that sort of nurtures itself. If I fall out of that, yes, then I meditate. I do my own work with myself. If I see any, so it's kind of like these mini adjustments. If there's anything that falls out, I know how to talk to myself the same way I did years ago. It took me 6 months to pull myself out of pain, 6 weeks, 6 days. I can now do it in seconds. So I catch it before it becomes anything. I turn it around very quickly. I have a rule for myself that I don't get out of bed unless I'm absolutely ecstatic to do so. And this is one of those, I like to make decisions for myself and, things that I step by. So I literally won't go. I've gotten out of bed every day. And I remember, what am I doing today? What is my purpose? What am I serving? So it's very intentional what I do. And when I feel that spark of like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing today, then I get up. And this is one way I've helped people heal depression too, where they say, I can't get out of bed. Now, these are hard, kind of tough practices, not for everyone, for sure, but I will tell them, okay, don't get out of bed until you have a reason to get out of bed. And you lay there and you lay there and you lay there until you remember what's important to you. And there's a framework they can go through. And eventually they find it. They all do. And it kind of turns that cycle around. Now I'm starting to remember there's a reason to live. And I let myself go all the way down to zero instead of faking it and just dredging through the day. I say, no, that's not the kind of day I'm going to have. Yeah. So my teacher taught me, there's a certain point where you meditate, which I did for 20 something years, and then there comes a point where who's the meditator? Who's meditating? You're kind of backtracking.
Yeah.
But if there is a sense of self that feels it's out of space or out of sorts, meditate. So yes, I do that. And I offer a free monthly meditation group. You can find it on my website, amarasamata.com. And I offer different layers of things, as I have very high-end services. I have mid-tier, and then I always have free spiritual services and spiritual advice. Anybody, Q&A, if anyone wants to ask me, I will open up to, and I guide just a simple meditations that helped me when I was evolving into greater self-awareness.
Well, I'm very, very glad that I got out of bed today. So I had the chance to talk to you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been, I don't know what to expect. It's been really wonderful. I am now, it wasn't enough. I'll put lots of links into the notes so people can explore and everything. But that's my next step now, is to go and have a cup of tea and just to go and explore more about you and what you've done. And so it just feels like you've got it going on. You know what it's about, and not many people have that. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with me and with everybody else. It's been incredibly generous of you. So yeah, I appreciate you.
You're so welcome. Thank you. And thank you for showing up in the way that you do. I appreciate it.